I'd like to officially welcome you to OpenSesame and Meridian Knowledge Solutions webinar, What's Hot and What's Not in Learning and Development. And today, I'm so thrilled to be joined by Carrie Barnett. Carrie is the Strategic Partner Manager of OpenSesame, and my colleague, Sean Osborne, who is the Senior Vice President of Product for Meridian Knowledge Solutions. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's get started.
As Michelle mentioned, I'm Carrie Barnett from OpenSesame, and if you're not familiar with OpenSesame, we pride ourselves on developing the world's most productive and admired workforces. Well, how do we do this? With an intense focus on quality. We maintain the most comprehensive catalog of courses from the world's leading publishers. They're easily integrated into your learning system. In addition, we provide expert curation services enable you to stay focused on your business.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sean Osborne from Meridian. If you haven't heard of Meridian, we serve customers with complex learning challenges in the public and private sectors. Our learning management system drives the outcomes our customers need through an experience they want to provide to their learners. Whether their learners are inside their organization or outside, no one helps drive value through learning like we do.
All right, so we're going to take you through the results of the Global Sentiment Survey that is run annually. OpenSesame has sponsored this survey for a number of years, almost from the beginning. We're going to press on and take you through the results of the survey and try to point out what we think will certainly continue to be a very interesting year with learning and development. There are 5 things we want to look at today. We'll push through to those conclusions in just 2 slides, but we'll have a lot of meat in the middle that you won't want to miss. Taking a look at the survey results from 2021, this is a survey that Donald Taylor and the Learning and Performance Institute has been running annually for 8 years. More than 3,000 people responded this year, representing 95 countries. It's truly a global survey. Respondents were tasked with selecting 3 of 16 options of L&D topics. The survey posed the question, what will be hot in workplace learning and development next year? Here are the 16 items the survey asked people to choose from. Take a look at the list. Which of these things do you think were at the top of the list? Drop what you think the respondents chose as the hottest trends in the chat. We'll see if you're right in just a minute. You'll notice that there's an asterisk next to reskilling and upskilling, and it says new in 2021. That was an option that was added to the list this year. Video, which had been at the bottom of the list in 2014, finally hit the bottom of the list and was removed and replaced with reskilling and upskilling. Now we're going to show you what the results were. If you picked reskilling and upskilling, you were right. Reskilling and upskilling was number 1. Almost everything on the list is at a lower position than it was last year. You can see the prior position numbers in the parentheses. Now we want to highlight reskilling and upskilling because it's at the top of the list, and that's extraordinary. And it's unexpected for a number of reasons. We knew it was a word that people were saying, but we didn't expect it to go to number 1. It's the job of learning and development to reskill and upskill people. So why would it come out of nowhere and go straight to number 1? If it had been put on the list 2 years ago, it would be nowhere near the most popular option. Right now, we can focus on the top 3 things that we get from this, and then we'll drill down quickly into how popular reskilling has begun. So, what were the 3 takeaways? The 3 takeaways from the survey this year are, first, reskilling, upskilling is number 1. We'll look at that in more detail. Second, of all of these options, and you can see a lot of red arrows pointing downwards, people think these are less important than last year, apart from collaborative and social learning, which has bounced back. Third, hot technologies have fallen down considerably. Artificial intelligence and virtual and augmented reality, which have been hot and sexy technologies that people wanted to get to grips with, have really dropped down this year in particular. And as we'll see, artificial intelligence has fallen from 5th to 12th place. Now, let's have a look at reskilling and upskilling, just to explain why it's so extraordinary. That score, 13%, is really, really high. Each year, there are more and more people answering the survey, and sometimes the votes will flatten out. it means that a smaller and smaller number of votes are required to get to number one. Last year, the number one vote was 10.4% of the respondents. We haven't had a 13% winner since 2016. Would anyone like to guess in the chat what the winner was in 2016? Now we're going to talk about some key things. What has, for example, reskilling and upskilling really meant?
Thanks, Carrie. If we look at reskilling and collaboration and the fall of hot technologies, there's this real issue with the idea that reskilling and upskilling is just what we do. So what does it mean when people are talking about it? We're going to look at some of the numbers now and some of the thinking behind it, and then we'll have another look at it, less in terms of numbers and more in terms of some of the words that people have used. So reskilling and upskilling at the moment. We're thinking about it, we're talking about it, and typically it's in terms of COVID. The impact of the pandemic means we have to do things in a different way. But let's start with a look at this Google Trends graph for interest in reskilling and upskilling as terms. You can see an uptick in people searching for it starting around January 2019, which was 12 months before the pandemic hit most of the world. There are a couple of things you can point out here. When you look at this graph, you can say, hey, in June 2019, there was an EU conference in upskilling, and there's an uplift in people searching to find out exactly what it means when they're searching for the term. The Reskilling Revolution was a paper introduced by the World Economic Forum in January 2020. And after that, there was just another huge uptick in people interested in what was going on with this term. So this is a term that's been around for a while. Back in 2019, reskilling was all about the idea that your workforce is going to be displaced by automation and artificial intelligence. That's true up until February 2020, but at some point it shifted over to, we need to get people new jobs and skill them up for it because the pandemic has really changed things. And even at the Learning Technologies Conference in London in February 2020, which was the last event before the lockdown in the United Kingdom, there were two people, one from Poland talking about ups in reskilling and upskilling, and also one person from the Trades Union Congress talking about how important it is to reskill people for new jobs. Nothing to do with the pandemic. It was all to do with the economic state of the world.
Now, coming back to the point about what was popular in number one in 2016. Number one in 2016 was collaboration and social learning. And we can look at these two options, personalization and collaborative learning, which have dominated the table for the past 4 years. But if you look at the positions on the table, you can see that actually they've been highly ranked until this year. Now look at the orange line. Collaborative learning was on a steady trend down in terms of the share of the vote, but bucked the trend and came back strong again. This is very unusual. Usually when things start going down the table, they don't bounce back. And we have to ask why, especially when everything else that was on the table earlier either went down or just stayed even. The answer can come down to what people experienced last year. People started using Zoom, Teams, Slack, and Yammer more and more, and there was more informal sharing and particularly social and collaborative learning. Knowledge management shifted from being a theoretical idea to a practical one. L&D saw that it was possible to make this work. People had to make do with what they had because of budget cuts. And given that if we say we can't give you a course, but we can give you and get you sharing information with an expert, actually, that can be pretty effective. We'd like to show you 5 years of the survey to look at this point about why some hot technologies seem to really take a hit this year. What happened? It's probably not a surprise, but we'll give you a bit of background. Most of the time, from year to year, things are going down. We've picked out options here to show. So microlearning is on its way down, along with mobile delivery, curation, and video. Now, if something's on the way down, it doesn't mean that it's becoming less popular. The question is, what will be hot next year? This just means it's becoming less hot. So it may be becoming less hot because it's actually become more popular. If everyone's doing microlearning or mobile delivery, it's not hot anymore, is it? And this is most likely what happened with some of these options. If you look at microlearning, it's something people are familiar with, so it's very useful. It's not always hot. Mobile delivery, yes, that was at the top of the chart in 2014, and now everyone can do it. And video, the same thing. Very highly placed in 2014, went to the bottom of the table last year and has been removed. Now, what's hot, what's not, the question is not defined in any way. So the interpretation is different given who's reading it. And what about workflow learning? It was thought it may be too general of a phrase to be added to this survey. We can see here that there are 3 options here, which are going down the table because they've been adopted. So these things are just being accepted, but curation is different. Curation is kind of like a wallflower. It comes to the dance, but it never gets involved. It stands around on the edges. Curation is popular with people who theorize about learning, but in practice, talking to the people who are involved in trying to make it work, curation is just a little bit too difficult practically. And this is for people who are tied up getting stuff done every day. So curation is something that has never, ever been taken off of the table.
Now, what about virtual and augmented reality? This is a different case here. Virtual and augmented reality, when you talk to people in the field, it's a very popular idea in theory, but not many people are doing it in practice. It's not like it was with video and mobile 6 or 7 years ago when everyone had a smartphone in their pocket and was really starting to engage on these devices, not just for learning and other, for other purposes. Some people are using VR and AR in practice and they're getting great value of it, but most people are not. Virtual and augmented reality was something that was very popular because it was a hot technology generally, and not just in learning back in 2017, it was all over the news. It's made its way down because it's tough to actually implement, a bit like curation. So one of the hot technologies is on the way down because it's hard to do, although you can really see a practical benefit for it. Now, artificial intelligence, this was a rising star. Starts off in 2017, it goes up, and then it starts coming down. If it's on number 5 and it looks like it's about to drop down, maybe 3 places this year, it would fall to 8 or 9. But no, this year it plummets all the way down to number 12. No option in the history of the survey has fallen by that many places, or by as many percentage points, 3.3, as artificial intelligence did. Why is that? In 2020, people were exhausted trying just to get learning done in their organizations. They didn't have time to think about radical new technologies, so they pushed it to one side. AI was something that they could not envision happening in their workplace. And that's why this drop was going to happen anyway. It was accelerated and then just fell down. AI and virtual reality will come out of this drop. They both have valuable things to share. But right now, people don't have the time and are just too busy and cannot make the headspace for something that is so radically different. The things that are popular and work this year held up this year with other things that have helped people do existing things. Virtual reality is just too much of a jump mentally for people to think about applying that to their current circumstances.
So now let's look at the COVID effect. What sort of impact has COVID had on us? The survey asked people, how do you think the pandemic is going to change the way you work this year? Now, this was an optional question. People didn't have to answer it, but 44% of people did. They generated 24,000 words, which is the equivalent number of words as in the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's a lot of output to get through, and reading through it all was extraordinary. You won't be shocked by the word cloud that comes out of this. If you take out the word will and you take out the word learning, this is the word cloud you get from it. And it's not really surprising. Look at it. You've got online, virtual, digital, remote, and training. Bang, right there in your face. Oh, and the word up here, face, by the way, is from face-to-face being used as a phrase. But there's something else here as well. There's a word here which was unexpected, focus. And when we look at all the answers involving the word focus, you can see here, it's not surprising that most people are saying, yeah, we're going to move stuff online. And there are going to be a lot of quotes to support that. And these are the general quotes people have had to say about it. There are three things that people have agreed on with regard to focusing on. The first one is that they're going to focus on new ways of delivering. Number one is digital and hybrid delivery. But look on the right-hand side here. People are also talking explicitly about the idea that they're going to focus more on supporting the business, on performance, on adding value. Now, those are phrases that people have spontaneously come up with, and all are agreeing on it without presumably even talking to each other about it. And the third thing is digital skills, getting people acclimated to working digitally. So that's in there as well. That's something we're going to come back to in a second when we look at what happens next. Sean, would you like to share some thoughts?
Yeah, I talked to a lot of Meridian's customers, and I've really heard two messages from them coming out of the first year of the pandemic. First, they want to find ways to consolidate their digital gains from the past year. Nearly every customer of ours has moved some portion of their in-person learning online. In many cases, they've seen real value from doing so, whether it's reduced travel time or costs, and they want to maintain these benefits. But second, and this kind of dovetails into what you see on the right here, we're increasingly seeing our customers using learning to drive engagements with audiences that are outside of their organizations. In this case, they use training to engage their customers or their partners and members, and it's something that can really help drive bottom line growth. We see a lot of movement in that direction from our customers.
So with regards to artificial intelligence coming back into the spotlight, it's a great tool for analytics and is doing some great things in terms of supporting learners. It is massively underrated. AI is being adopted by learning management system providers to provide a way of sifting through the content. And in fact, we at OpenSesame are using AI for exactly this purpose. And it may be when it becomes apparent in 2 or 3 years' time, people will say they didn't even realize they were using it, and it was already a part of a tool that they were using. So we're going to share some conclusions throughout that we've discussed. To recap, everyone's talking about reskilling and upskilling, but that doesn't mean they actually know what they're talking about or all agree on the term. But as we said, it's a part of the ambient wordscape, and it describes an awful lot of what's going on, and it does reflect people's reality. Collaborative learning has gone from theory to practice, and hot technologies are out of favor. They've been shoved down into the trough of disillusionment. They will rebound. A core of L&D practitioners, not the majority, will have a new focus in 2021, which is focused on value. That's a wonderful thing. This year can actually be the year of building strategic influence on solid foundations, provided that we do the middle bit where we have adapted and we produce good practices. We will adapt and we will find what works and what doesn't work. We adopt that stuff and we move forward. We become strategic rather than tactical. Sean, would you like to share some final thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're at a pretty unique time, Gary. We feel like we're getting close to the end of the pandemic, but no one's really sure when it's going to kind of come to an end. But at the same point in time, we see such tightening in the labor markets that everyone is struggling for talent. Where does learning fit into this? I think learning is going to see continued disruption in terms of what is important and what is necessary today very tactically. While a lot of these technologies that can really help strategic learning are brought to bear. Just to touch on AI, as you referenced, at Meridian, our customers are using it to help learners both identify opportunities for growing their skills and their careers, but also to help understand by using xAPI and artificial intelligence, how learners can better be engaged. And then when you layer that capability on top of the need to help use learning to drive business outcomes, you can really see learning move from kind of a strategic, internally facing capability to something that is just foundational to the business and its engagement with customers and its constituents. And so I think while we're going to see disruption for the next couple of years in terms of priorities, as things come and go in reaction to bringing this pandemic to an end, we're going to emerge from that period with learning much more integrated into the strategic planning of organizations and the direction they're going.
That's awesome. So now we're going to open up the chat and answer any questions that you all may have had today.
I have one question that came in. One person is saying, I'm surprised at the drop in the focus on content curation. It's talked about often in my org. Any thoughts to share on it?
Had a little difficulty hearing the part in the middle. Could you repeat the question, Michelle?
Sure. I'll grab my microphone. The question was that the person said, I'm surprised at the drop in focus on content curation. It's important to my org and we talk about it a lot. Any thoughts to share?
So with respect to the drop in content curation, I do believe it is, again, a casualty of what was happening during the pandemic. You know, prior to the pandemic, people were able to focus and potentially put their energies into doing things like sifting through the courses and figuring out what was going to be the best fit for their particular company, or even at the more granular level, a specific department. So it's not to say that curation is less important. It just wasn't at the forefront of their minds. And what we found at OpenSesame is that, companies do feel that it's very important, and they've come to work with us to take on that burden and that lift for them.
Thank you. Another question I see is person saying maybe it's part of learning analytics, which was mentioned in your discussion, but I keep hearing about xAPI, but we're not sure how it can help us. Sean, I'll throw that one to you.
Certainly. So if you're hearing xAPI for the first time, it is the next standard in learning and how you can develop content. It provides a lot more data than previous standards like SCORM have been able to give you. So for instance, a very common demonstration, which I'm happy to arrange for somebody who reaches out, would be to show how a learner consumes a video file. While watching video and having content presented to a learner, you can see whether they pause, you can see how long they pause, you can see whether they fast forward. And this really just gives you a foundational basis for data to do something with. And that's where I think artificial intelligence and learning analytics come into play, where you can take this data that's very granular and very specific and very experiential in learning and really start to make sense of it and understand where you can improve your content, but also understand what trends lead to positive outcomes for your learners, so that you can rally your efforts around those trends and expanding those throughout your learning portfolio.
I'd also like to add that, we partner with Meridian such that we also are building xAPI capabilities that our systems will be able to communicate, how your learners are progressing through those courses, and it's all in a single platform for you to access. So I think that's what we're seeing in the future is, the increased extensibility of disparate systems working together to be able to make, your life a little bit easier.
Great, thank you for that additional thought, Carrie. Another question coming in. We've shifted all of our learning from in-classroom to online this year and are struggling to feel comfortable switching back. Any examples as to what either the panelists or those on the call are seeing in their organization? So if you're, if we, maybe Carrie and Sean, you can give some examples of your clients, and then anyone online, if you want to share what your organization is doing as far as the move back to in-classroom learning, or if you're having a shift to all online, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Carrie, why don't you go first?
I'd say it's been fairly slow for our client base to go back into face-to-face from my personal experience. But what I have seen is an uptick in our customers really ramping up to make sure that we curate courses for them that work for the employee who might be out in the field, or the employee who isn't necessarily sitting behind the desks. We've seen an increased focus on being able to, look at different types of content that can be deployed out to the learner base in an efficient way. But I haven't necessarily seen a super uptick in face-to-face learning from my experience.
I kind of alluded to it earlier. A lot of our customers are looking at their curriculum and saying, hey, certain parts we used to do in person. Over the last year, we did those virtually using tools like Microsoft Teams or Zoom. We can keep doing that. And tools like Meridian's LMS help you do that by just integrating seamlessly with these technologies. We also, though, see a lot of customers unsure when people are going to go back to the office. Many organizations have started putting their plans on hold given the way things are going with COVID and the numbers ticking up. And these customers they're more judicious in terms of business criticality to calling people together for their in-person learning. Some learning really just has to happen with an instructor and people in more of a traditional classroom setting in person. And the ability to plan resources and schedule is just it's up in the air for many of our customers.
Thank you, Sean. And I haven't seen anyone share on the chat yet, but please, if you want to tell us what your organization is doing in regards to all online learning versus any in-person learning, we'd love to hear from you and share your comments. While we're waiting for some additional comments from our guests, I will go on to the next question. This person is saying, I'm being asked to focus more on results rather than feedback from any particular course. Is anyone else being asked to focus more on the impact of your training program on company goals or revenue? So Carrie and Sean, if you want to give some examples, and then hopefully some of our guests will weigh in on what they're seeing and being asked to provide to their executive teams and their organizations.
I'll start. I kind of alluded to some of our customers using learning to really drive business outcomes. We see a lot of our organizations or our customer organizations have bases of members that they're looking to engage and build a lifelong relationship with. Now, this can be something that's like a professional development organization, or it could be something that is really targeted on training agents to be able to sell certain products. And using a system such as ours, we give you a backbone to be able to really track key numbers that you can report up to your executive team, whether it is direct revenue from courses sold or engagement metrics for how your members are frequently visiting your site to engage with you and through learning. The data is there to really tell that story and be successful in showing how learning is driving your organization's bottom line.
Without being able to speak to specific examples, what I can say anecdotally is, we have a very high renewal rate with our customers here at OpenSesame. 95% of our customers choose to stay with us year over year. And within that, we found that over 90% of our customers also say that they've realized a return on their investment in OpenSesame courses in that year. So from that speaks to, I think, a couple of different things. And what I can say is that learning and development is kind of a critically intangible importance to an organization. When you reinvest in the employees that you have, your costs are going to be overall lower because you're not constantly recruiting and retraining. So I think there is the value there, and between kind of the statistics and analytics that we're able to provide either to you directly or through your learning management system, I think OpenSesame customers will certainly see the value that they get out of investing in L&D and training.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Carrie. And if anyone else wants to share either your experience with the return to in-person learning or efforts to maintain all courses via virtual, or if you're being asked more and more to share your feedback on how your training sessions are impacting your company's goals and objectives, please put them into the chat window. Next question. My company is seeing our department shrink a bit, although we're being asked to do more, having to transfer courses meant to be presented over multiple days in person to online options only, and other tasks that we had not needed to deal with previously. Is anyone else seeing this sort of reduction in their teams across their organization? And again, Carrie, Sean, if you want to share maybe some experiences or comments you've heard from clients at Meridian and OpenSesame.
Well, at Meridian, I have certainly talked to some customers who are feeling the squeeze. Many of our customers are not when it comes to resourcing within their learning departments. But everyone seems these days to be able to be asked to do more and oftentimes to do more with less. And that puts you in a very tough spot. And I think this is where you really need to sit back and take a look and say, hey, how are the technologies and the tools available to us helping us drive outcomes? If you are setting up a multi-day training course, it's a mix of in-person and virtual environments. Is it easy for you? Do you have to generate a separate Zoom link yourself in Zoom and copy and paste and make sure you send out email invitations? If you do, you should take a look at some of the tools that are out there to help you reduce some of those manual steps, that you can really focus your efforts on the valuable capabilities you can provide and not on copying and pasting.
I couldn't agree with Sean more on that. I think I would love to hear any of our guests' experiences so that we can start thinking about ways that we can make that an even easier task for people to incorporate, doing more learning with less resources.
Thank you, Carrie and Sean. And thank you, Anna M. from Colorado, who mentioned to our question earlier that her organization is creating a mix of both online learning and in-person learning. I think it's great to see in-person learning coming back, and just having that in-person exchange of knowledge seems to be very popular and a goal that many of you have expressed you want to get back to in the months and years ahead. At the moment, I don't see any new questions. Carrie and Sean, if you want to share any final thoughts.
I'll go first. As I said, I really appreciate all of you taking the time to meet with us this morning. I think the year ahead and the years ahead in learning are going to be very interesting for us all, and look forward to engaging with you and partnering with you. So thank you very much for joining, and look forward to hearing from you.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Sean. It has been a pleasure to be with you all this morning. And certainly, if you have any further questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out.
Great. Thank you, Carrie and Sean. And everyone, thank you for attending this session on learning trends and technology with OpenSesame and Meridian Knowledge Solutions. As mentioned at the beginning of the call, this session has been recorded and will be made available to you in a few days. We appreciate your time today. Thank you.